저는 M이라고 합니다. 그리고 저의 한국 이름은 아미예요. 네, 맞아요. BTS 팬덤이랑 똑같아요. 웃겨요. 아니, 안 웃겨요.
Excuse me.
그리고 제가 한국 이름을 가지게 된 이유는 저희 어머니 한국 사람이라서예요. 그래서 한국어를 열심히 배우고 있어요. 열심히 배우고 있는데 너무 어려워요. 어떡하지? 저는 그냥 한국어 공부하는 모습을 찍고 싶었어요. 그래서 하고 있어요. 네. Apologies for my intro in Korean. It's always so cringe, but it's okay. I just wanted to show you my level of Korean just for you to get an idea of what it sounds like.
Don't be nervous, it's fine.
But anyways, hey guys, I wanted to film this video because I'm going to Korea very soon and I wanted to get back in the mood. In this video, I didn't want to only focus on the ways that I study. I also wanted to emphasize on the mistakes that I've made in the past and the mistakes that I may tend to still be doing, you know, because that's how we human work for some reason. Don't do it like me. First section, mistakes. First so-called mistake, buying more textbooks or books than I actually need. I feel like a lot of people are guilty of that, and the reason why I think it is a mistake is, first of all, it costs a lot of money, and second of all, when you accumulate too many books, you don't even know where to study from anymore. Now, I know the feeling of how refreshing it is and how motivating it can be to get a new book, because you just get so excited and you're like, I'm only going to study from it and it's going to be awesome. But the thing is, the more textbooks you have, the less you know where to study from. And so what happened with me is that I would take a textbook, I would open and be like, oh, this is such a great one, and then I would start studying from it. And I wouldn't even finish a chapter, that I would just take another textbook and be like, oh my god, but this one is amazing as well. So I would just move on to that other textbook without finishing anything that I've done on the first one. And it just gets really messy and I feel like there's no progress at all. So that's why I consider it a mistake for myself. But I do have a favorite textbook, and it's this one from Master Korean. This is the intermediate level. I'm actually using the basic one because I feel like the chapters are a little bit tricky, but this is the one I had on hand, so I'm just showing it to you. The reason why I like this book so much, first of all, just like any other textbooks, it has reading, writing, listening, and speaking. I feel like these are super helpful topics. So this is by far my favorite Korean textbook. And my favorite book, because I like to have a textbook and also a book to read from, because I think reading is also important. It's this one, Korean Stories for Language Learners. You might have seen it a lot on the social media, because I feel like a lot of Korean learners do have it. Basically, it has a bunch of different short stories in Korean, and then you have the English translation as well, vocabulary, as well as comprehension questions, which I honestly never do, to be honest. The cool thing about it is that it starts with very short and easy stories that I guess beginners can read. Obviously, you need to know how to read Hangul first, but the more you read and the more intense it gets and the longer the chapters get as well. So I feel like this is a book that can be for many different levels of Korean. So this is so great. This is great. I recommend. Second mistake that I used to make a lot, but I think it's really not as efficient at all, it's trying to go through as many grammar rules as possible. Now, I know it can be very satisfying because you have your to-do list and you write down all the grammar structures that you want to learn in a day and then the ones that you want to learn the next day. But the issue with that is that you're just going through them as fast as possible. At least that was the case for me. And I wasn't taking any time to review the grammar rules that I had learned in the past, so I would just forget all of them. In the end, I did not remember any of the grammar rules that I've learned. So I guess my tip for you and also for myself that I just want to say out loud is try to focus on just a few grammar rules per week and review them as much as I can by building sentences and speaking by myself, but just making up sentences using those grammar structures. Something that I really like doing, to be honest. But third mistake that I want to mention is only focusing on writing, for instance, instead of focusing on other skills such as speaking. Now, obviously, we all have a different purpose of learning a language, and that's completely fine. In my case, I really want to improve my speaking skills because I want to be able to communicate, you know, and I feel like that's what a lot of people want to do as well. But the issue is with a lot of people, and it's not only in Korean, I guess it also touches any other languages, but when you don't practice speaking, you are not used to your own voice in another language, if that makes sense. So what I'm trying to say is, if you don't practice speaking as much as you can, you're not gonna get used to your own voice in another language, and you might find it cringe, you might find it unnatural, and all of those feelings are going to lead you to not wanting to talk at all. And so this is going to be a huge limit for you to improve. I guess my tip would be, if you don't have the chance to know any native in your surrounding, either you could meet new ones. I mean, there's a lot of apps such as Hello Talk where you can meet people online and have like phone calls with them to practice. And if you don't want to do that and you don't know anyone that speaks Korean in your surrounding, something that I really like doing is imitating a character from a show or even from a YouTube video. Like, you're just trying to mimic that.
내가 형을 왜 뭐 데리고 싶은 이유가 뭐 조금이라도 있겠어요.
I feel like this is a great way to improve and also to get used to yourself speaking another language. And honestly, don't be afraid to make mistakes, even if people might judge you. Like, I might have made 1,000 mistakes in this video speaking English, but it doesn't really matter, because as long as you understand my point, it's all that matters. As long as you understand the message that I'm trying to get through, that's all that matters. So it doesn't matter. Just speak, say whatever you want. Doesn't matter. Okay, next mistake I want to mention, and this is the worst one for me. Like, this is the one that I'm still doing and I need to punish myself for that, but it's not being consistent. We all know how consistency is key if we want to improve in anything, literally anything. Consistency is key. Consistency doesn't mean studying 1 hour of Korean every single day. You shouldn't overwhelm yourself, because otherwise you're just gonna quit, and that's the worst that can happen to you ever. Being consistent just means doing it little by little, but progressively and continuously. You know, it doesn't have to be every day, it can be every other day, but you just need to find the time to dedicate to Korean if you really want to improve in the long run. I guess things that help me the most for consistency are apps. I have 2 favorite ones. The first one is Drops. Basically, you have 5 free minutes every day to learn new vocabulary. You can choose a category you want to study from, for example, food, transportation, and then the app is going to give you a bunch of different vocabulary that you can memorize. And the second app I want to recommend is Quizlet. Basically, you just create your own flashcards, or you can steal the flashcards of other people, which is also super helpful. I used to not like Quizlet that much to study Korean, just because making flashcards with Korean words was very time consuming for me, but I feel like it was made a lot more efficient, and now if you write a Korean word, it's directly going to be translated into English or vice versa. So I feel like it's super helpful, and when I study a chapter from my textbook, I like to make flashcards on Quizlet to review the vocabulary. And finally, the last mistake I want to mention, I'm very guilty of that, and I'm probably going to continue being guilty of that, but I'm going to say it anyways: spending too much time on note-taking. Maybe mistake is not the word that should be used, it's just something that's not very efficient, because you're spending a lot of time trying to make your notes look pretty, but that time that you're using to make it pretty, you could use it to learn. So for instance, I can spend 1 hour making notes, trying to make them look pretty and everything, but really these are notes that I could write in 10 or 20 minutes and then use the remaining of time to practice the vocabulary or come up with sentences or making more exercises. So I think this is just something that's not very efficient, but I understand people that do it because it's very satisfying to have pretty notes. Sometimes it can even be motivating. So I don't know if it should be called a mistake. I think it's motivating, but not very efficient. But anyways, these were all of the mistakes that I wanted to mention, and I will move on to how I study Korean. before you start learning a language, you really need to define your purpose. Obviously, your purpose can change, your goals can change. It doesn't matter, but I do think it's important to start with a purpose. It can be wanting to work in Korea, it can be becoming a translator, it can be understanding every K-pop songs that you hear. It doesn't really matter, but I do think it's important to define your purpose because it's also going to affect the way that you study. I guess my main purpose is just communication. So that's why my studying tends to be more focused towards daily expressions and speaking instead of writing and very formal stuff. I did want to mention that first before telling you how I study and all that. But yeah, very quick with the physical resources that I'm using. I really like the Master Korean textbook, as I mentioned earlier, and this Korean Stories for Language Learners. And as for online resources, I really like the website Talk to Me in Korean to study grammar structures. As I've mentioned, it's not about the amount of structures that I'm learning, but I just make a small selection of the structures that I want to incorporate in my lexicon, and I just study them. And the other thing that I really like is YouTube. I love YouTube. I love watching YouTube videos, and I feel like it can be super helpful. I'm just gonna give you the 3 channels that I recommend the most as of today. The first one being Hey Jadu, which is actually a cartoon. I don't know if it's targeted towards kids or grown-ups. It's something that's really easy to understand, yet it's very rich in vocabulary and expressions, so you can easily assimilate everything. The 2 other channels that I'm currently really enjoying are vloggers. Well, actually, the first one is Hyeri. Basically, she's an actress in Korea and she also has her YouTube channel. And I really like it because she has the subs in Korean, so it's really easy to understand what she's saying and you can easily learn from it. And the second channel that I'm enjoying a lot as well is Chanina. She's a vlogger and she's super cute and she married an American man. And the good thing about her vlogs is that she has subtitles in English and in Korean, so it's super helpful to learn Korean and understand. These are the 3 channels that I'm currently enjoying the most to get as much Korean listening into my routine as possible. And what I also like doing is I have a notebook dedicated for that. See, this is Annyeong Jaduya. This is the first channel that I've mentioned. Basically, what I like doing is writing down the expressions that they're using. So I have like examples. 냄새 전다. It smells horrible. 힘 빠져. I have no energy. Or 왕설사 터질 것 같다. I think I'm going to explode. These are not expressions that you would find in textbooks, yet they can be very useful in everyday life. Basically, this is how I study Korean. You know, there's nothing fancy, there's nothing magical about it, but I think it's always interesting to know how other people do it just to get a little bit of inspiration. So that's why I would also highly encourage you to share with me your tips and tricks and everything. So I'm counting on you guys. No, but for reals, I hope you've enjoyed this video and that it was helpful, and I will see you in Korea. Next video is going to be in Korea. I'm so excited. I'll see you. Okay, also this is me from the future. No, but if you stay this far, there's a super cool thing that I forgot to mention. It's either on YouTube or Netflix, and it's like this Google Chrome extension that you can add to your videos, and basically it allows you to have dual subtitles. So I've used it for Korean and English, and I'll just show you. When you hover over certain words, it gives you the translation. And it's super practical when you want to study from a video. Honestly, it's life-saving.